Not the twin paradox. From producing several videos about the twin paradox and having quite a lengthy discussion in the Mathematical Mechanics group on Facebook, I have concluded that the real issue that people have with the twin paradox is usually not with the twin paradox itself at all, but with the special time dilation background. Context for the twin paradox. The twin paradox is related to the scenario where Bob hops into a spaceship on Earth and travels to Proxima Centauri at near light speed, and returns. On hopping out of the spaceship, Bob finds that, for example, while he experienced only 2 years on the trip, the Earth has aged by around 10 years. This is made more poignant by saying that Alice is Bob's stay-at-home twin and that Alice is now significantly older than Bob. In extreme cases of the paradox, dead. A lot of people react to this by seeing the difference in age as being the paradox and coming up with a variety of ways to explain it away, usually along the lines that either time goes slowly in space or goes slowly at high speed. Not only are these suggestions not a part of relativity, but they do not at all address what the real paradox is. They try to cut the Gordian knot by explicitly or implicitly denying that the conditions for the paradox can even occur. The actual twin paradox is that if a naive relativistic analysis is done from the point of view of the spaceship, the conclusion seems inevitable that the Earth will have aged less. Let's unpack that. The naive idea of time dilation is that when you see someone going fast, you also see their clock going slow. So as the spaceship is viewed from the Earth on its trip, the clocks on the spaceship will go slow by a factor of gamma, and so when it returns it will be less aged than the Earth. But then, again naively, it is said in relativity that velocity is relative, hence the name. So anyone can consider themselves stationary. So, from the point of view of the spaceship, the Earth is travelling fast and is aging slowly. When they meet again, the Earth should be aged less rather than more. This is the actual paradox, that using the naive laws of relativity, both the conclusion that the Earth should be older and that the spaceship should be older have been drawn by apparently rigorous reasoning. In fact, the reasoning is not rigorous, and this will be discussed in this video. But for now, the point is that many people respond to this by saying that since the ship accelerated, all bets are off and the analysis from the ship can be ignored. The claim is that in some sense it is the ship clock that objectively went slower, and anything else is a delusion. I've even heard people claim that an inertial frame travelling at speed with respect to Earth is ipso facto not inertial, and that this is where the time dilation comes from. Whatever the excuse, the intention is to claim that Bob would see the Earth time going quickly during his entire trip, so everything is fine. But everything is not fine. This is not relativity. In relativity, for almost all of the trip, both participants, the Earth and the ship, see the other one as going slowly. This is fundamental to the idea of special relativity. It is the feature to be explained, not to be explained away. This seems to become a contradiction when clocks are compared at the end of the trip. They cannot both have run slower than the other, and they did not. It is clear that the resolution must have something to do with the acceleration, since velocity is entirely relative in relativity, so it cannot in and of itself be the issue. But the full resolution of the paradox requires to complete the analysis from the point of view of the spaceship. This can be made more clear by replacing the Earth with another spaceship. The symmetry in the problem, when stated this way, makes it harder to simply claim that one of them is travelling objectively faster. And given just the relative velocities, it is possible to say that at least one accelerated, but impossible to say which. There must be an element that is missing from the discussion. What the twin paradox is not. A related effect does occur in Newtonian mechanics. This effect also occurs in an Einsteinian context, and it complicates the discussion. It is useful to cover this here so that it can be removed from the argument specifically about the relativistic time dilation. Suppose the ship is stationary in the Earth Proxima frame, a fixed distance from the Earth, about a light year out just past the Oort cloud, depending on which model of the Oort cloud you subscribe to. Information from the ship takes a year to arrive at the Earth, so the YouTube video being uploaded by the travelling twin to a channel on Earth is 1 year out of date. But it appears in real time, 1 second per second, just delayed by that year. However, if the ship is travelling away from the Earth, even assuming no odd behaviour with time and speed, then the delay on the arrival will increase over time. This means that the video will not only be delayed, but the delay is getting longer. So, the end of the video arrives with more delay than the start. The end of a 1 hour video arrives more than an hour after the start has arrived. This amounts to saying that the vision runs slow and continues to run slow. The channel could be coming from a webcam on the dash of the ship, simply beaming live the events inside the cabin. This webcam would present a scene in which the travelling twin moves slowly, an object falls in the artificial gravity slowly, and the clock on the walls goes slowly. Even chemical reactions would go slowly. This sounds like a time dilation effect, and some people think this is what time dilation is, a trick of the light, a philosophical gimmick. Real time is absolute and objective, right? We just measure rates against the real time. Time dilation isn't actual, is it? But this is not what relativity or even time dilation is about. The ship has long-range sensors. It views the Earth. The light from the Earth arrives delayed, and as the ship travels outward, even more delayed. So, from the point of view of the travelling twin, the Earth cam is running slow. We all experience this on the internet and call it video buffering. Looking back at the Earth from space, the onboard computer works out how far the ship is from the Earth. Then any information from the Earth can be time-stamped with the time at which the information arrived at the ship, less the time taken for the light to travel to the ship. This gives the compensated time, in retrospect, of when, on the ship's clock, the reported events happen on Earth. If the ship waits until the whole hour has arrived, then plays it back at the speed of the timestamps, it is possible to see delayed but otherwise synchronized what is happening on Earth a year or so ago, in delayed real time. Like reruns, if anyone still knows what they are. Even if this was time dilation, and at the moment it is analogous to it, there is a further and very dramatic problem lurking in the details. Turn the ship around. Now the end of an hour video from the onboard webcam arrives less than an hour after the start, because the delay is less and less as the ship approaches the Earth. So the webcam feed arrives amusingly sped up with silly voices. Everything goes fast, but so too does the feed from the Earth in the cabin of the ship. If there are no funny relativistic effects, then the speed up and slow down of the webcam as viewed from the Earth would all cancel out, so that as the ship landed, the webcam would return to real time and right now in the cabin as the travelling twin opens the door on the landing pad. Since both sensors, eyes and webcam, are delayed by the time it takes light to travel from the ship to the waiting crowd, the effect is automatic synchronization. Relativity is after the fact. Having described the effect of the time delays on signals, it can now be emphasized that this is not what relativity is. In relativity, what is intended by saying that a ship seen travelling at high speed is contracted is that, after taking into account the time taken to receive the signal, and so work out what is really going on, the ship is contracted. This contraction can be derived without any relativity from the theory of electromagnetics, in which an object at high speed, with respect to the experimenter, literally has a reduced length, a non-stress contraction. Historically, relativity is an interpretation of this electromechanical effect, not the derivation of it. Signal time delays that increase with distance will give an older version of the front of the ship that is going away from you than the back. So the back vision will have got further away and the ship will seem contracted. But for a ship approaching, the back vision rather than the front vision of the ship is older, so the back will be further away than it should be and the ship will seem stretched out, not contracted. But in Newtonian mechanics, the net time shift over an entire round trip is certain to be zero, regardless of the trip, and taking into account the time taken for the passage of light, one would deduce that the ship clock rate is the same as the Earth after all, at all times. In a scenario, the time dilation is really an optical illusion. The idea of having to compute in a non-trivial manner what is out there is not unique to this situation. The light from a distant object does not in and of itself deliver the fully formed idea of that object to our eyes. The details need to be computed, and our eyes often get this wrong. There are numerous examples of quite extreme errors in interpretation committed by the human visual system, even systematically. But in the case of these simple scenario signal delays, it is possible to work out precisely what is going on. Our definition of something happening now is that the signal arrives from 1 light year away, 1 light year from now. While now is happening now, our knowledge of now is only compiled after the fact. This has nothing to do with relativity, it is a fact of life. In relativity, after taking into account the time taken for the passage of the signal, and thus after taking out the issues of collation of information and computation from the light signals, there is a picture left of a ship flying to Proxima with its clock running slow as measured from the Earth. And measurement is our only definition of reality. If there is a reality beyond the measurements, it is forever beyond our ken. In all, and that means absolutely all senses, reality is the measurements we make. We put together, via a process of sensory fusion, a single dynamic picture of what the world would be like if only we could sense it directly. A matter of computation through which we see the world darkly. Pushing the boundaries by communicating. It is intended that the previous sections have removed several issues of what relativity and the twin paradox are not, and that it is now possible to focus on the real issues. In the basic scenario, it is 4 light years to Proxima, which is stationary with respect to the Earth, and Bob is travelling fast enough with respect to the Earth Proxima frame that he sees the distance as 1 light year. This goes part way to explain the idea that he gets to Proxima when his clock is reading 1 year. Alice on the Earth and Bob agree on this, but Alice says the distance is 4 light years and that Bob has a slow clock. Bob says his clock is fine and that Proxima is 1 light year away, while Alice says Bob's clock is 4 times slow and that Proxima is 4 times further away. A different attitude, but exactly the same conclusion about events that occur at the same place in space at the same time. The problem is, and this is a problem even if Bob does not stop and there is absolutely no acceleration involved, Bob sees Alice's clock as going 4 times slow, and so when he gets to Proxima, he can say that Alice has experienced only 3 months, 1/4 of a year. So the core point is that while Bob and Alice agree on what time is showing on Bob's clock when he reaches Proxima, they disagree on what Alice's clock was showing at this time. Bob says it is the Alice of 3 months that is simultaneous with his arrival at Proxima, and Alice says it is 4 years or thereabout. Who is right? Alice? Bob? Both? Neither? What if Bob yells to Alice, or rather, since there is no air in space, he sends a laser signal. He sees the 3-month Alice when he is at Proxima, so if he yells at Alice, which one gets the message? 3-month Alice, who thinks Bob has just left on a 4-year journey, or 4-year Alice, who sees Bob arriving at Proxima? Okay, now we have to look at some details of signalling that are often glossed over in this type of discussion. Bob does not strictly see Alice, but deduces Alice is at the 3-month mark. Look for a moment at the signalling issue. Bob actually sees Alice at some point less than 3 months from the start. If Bob sends a radio call to Alice the moment he arrives at the drop-off, then Alice will get it in her time at the 8-year mark, as computed in Alice's frame where Proxima is not moving. Bob sees Alice as being 1 light year away, so the signal should get to her in 1 year's time, except that Alice is moving away at almost the speed of light, so by the time the light signal has caught up to her, as it must eventually, Alice will actually be much further away in Bob's frame. And even though she has a slow clock, her clock will be reading 8 years when the signal actually arrives. That is, if Alice is moving at 95% of the speed of light, then the relative speed in Bob's frame is 5% of the speed of light, so it takes around 20 times longer to catch up. Alice's time is going slowly, however, so in Bob's time, Alice's clock gets to exactly 8 years as the signal arrives. Bob does not agree that it took the signal 4 years, but many more years, while Alice's clock, Bob says, is running many times slow, and so that he can see that she gets it on her clock at the 8-year mark. I did have a note here in this essay to say, do the full calculations, but I decided against that on the principle that it is the qualitative version of the story that I am expounding here. The point is that while Bob and Alice disagree on times and lengths and simultaneity, they agree on observations about things that happen at the same time and the same place. Indeed, the disagreement in times and length is determined in relativity on the principle that people must agree on events that happen at the same time and place. So Bob sends Alice a message saying her clock is at the 3-month mark, but it does not reach her until her clock says 8 years, by which time Bob is 8 light years away to Alice, although Bob actually disagrees on where he was when Alice got the message, because those things do not happen at the same place, even though they happen at the same time in Bob's frame. The core point is that Alice and Bob disagree on what events happen simultaneously. Bob says that his arrival at Proxima was coincident with Alice's clock displaying 3 months, and Alice says it was coincident with her clock displaying 4 years. As an aside, often these types of arguments are used to prove relativity, but these arguments are circular. If you assume relativity is correct, then this is the way to work out what the relative time and distance are, but it is not a proof that relativity is correct. This might be the source of some confusion where people think that it is all about the delays due to light signals. In principle, one could have a universe in which nothing travels at the speed of light and the people communicate at the speed of sound, while the nominal speed of light is invariant. Seeing the future. This relation between inertial frames can be expressed intuitively in the notion that if you're travelling past a landscape at near the speed of light, then from your point of view, out ahead of you is the future of that landscape, not the present. You see into the future as you look forward, and into the past as you look backward. One time when I said this, someone accused me of spouting pseudoscientific nonsense. They said that I was saying that relativity makes us all psychic. I suspect that this person was scraping the bottom of the barrel looking for red herrings. But this accusation brings up another point, which is important to comprehension of the experience of the twins Alice and Bob. What you see right now is not the same as what is happening right now. This was discussed earlier and needs to be brought up again here. What you see right now that is occurring 1 light year away happened 1 year ago. The sun is 8 light minutes ago. We do not see the sun now, but 8 minutes ago. Proxima Centauri b is 4 light years away. We do not see Proxima Centauri b now. We see it as it was 4 years ago. In particular, it is a feature of relativity that although I see your future as I look out the front of my ship, the time delay in that signal getting to me and then me sending the signal to you is such that if I see you being punched by a gorilla in your future, then you will hear duck after your lights go out. Or in that case, I guess you won't hear it at all. From my point of view, causality is safe. It is just your clocks that are out of kilter. From your point of view, presumably a hospital bed, working out what happened in retrospect, the light from the assault travelled to my ship, and then the signal came back. One simple way to think of this is that my ship is a mirror and the signal bounced back. But either way, the arrival of the warning occurs after the arrival of the gorilla. As I judge it, I sent the warning when the clock of yours that was next to me was showing a time in the past with respect to the clock next to you. That is all. I just think your clocks are wrong. This is not being psychic. It is just the difference in simultaneity that occurs as a matter of course in the relativistic world. To be psychic in this manner would require what is known as a closed time-like loop, where a signal originating from the event of the gorilla attack loops around through the spaceship and then returns at the time of the gorilla attack, requiring to turn up earlier to be effective. This requires the signal to travel backwards in time. Now, if we had a signal that could travel far faster than light, we would have a stage act that we could take on the road predicting gorilla attacks. The mythical or misinterpreted tachyon would do, but that is outside the context of special relativity at this stage in the game. Review of concepts. Regardless of how the claim is phrased, it is not correct to say that the twin paradox in any way, shape or form comes from the idea that the travelling twin's clock objectively goes slower. Though not described in this essay, it comes from the interaction between the acceleration and the inertial frames. In relativity, rather than all inertial frames being able to claim they are stationary, it is much more the case that no inertial frame can claim to be stationary. The term has no meaning in relativity. The crucial stepping-off point for understanding the paradoxes of relativity is in understanding that simultaneity is relative, and so there is no generic sense of absolute time. In our universe, we happen to have the cosmic microwave background radiation that can be used to define a preferred frame that sees the radiation as on average symmetric, but this is like using a large contingent material body as a reference. The laws of relativity do not recognize that material body as having a fundamental status. As the travelling twin heads out to the distant star, both the stay-at-home twin and the travelling twin see each other's clocks as going slow. Finally, breaking the fourth wall, I hope that you like this discussion and would like to hear more. To facilitate this, like a street performer, I now pass the hat around. Please like, subscribe and share this video with your friends or your enemies or anyone